this is a nice surprise, and not just because I get to keep it short this week since, I mainly prepped a bunch of jokes about generic dark fairy tale movies sucking, and this one is actually kind of good, so now I can't use them, and this gets to be a short episode, and I can start beer o'clock early this weekend. Anyway, yeah, this is pretty good. Who would have guessed? Like, the marketing has been shitty to non-existent, and the studio dumped it in January since I guess either it wasn't ready, or like every other genre company, they figured it too was going to swallow up last fall, so they moved every other horror movie out of the way, but this is actually really good. Some really solid, creepy, weird, serious business nightmare stuff. I ended up digging the hell out of it. Who knew? No, I don't want to oversell it, since it's pretty much what it says on the label. The story of Hansel and Gretel, this is that with the names flipped around, because honestly, what the hell does Hansel even do to get top billing in that original? And this is that, but what if it happened in a sort of realistic, or at least serious period horror movie patina over it? Now, for a hot second, it almost seems like they're going all the way, and it's going to be full-on realism, just two kids meeting a cannibal serial killer thing. But they do know what side their bread is buttered on, and the direction is super stylish and self-consciously infused with a lot of retro horror aesthetic samples. It pretty much looks and sounds exactly like what you'd get if a producer in the modern-day Sam R. Croft or Roger Corman mold handed some hungry or ambitious filmmaking team copies of The Witch and Mandy and said, mash these two things into one things and wrap it around the skeleton of a marketable IP that's in the public domain that we don't have to pay for. And so with all the oversaturated gel lighting and compressed aspect ratios and Kubrickian smash-cut nightmare compositions, you might as well just throw in the real witchcraft and get it over with. In any case, we're somewhere in medieval Europe or possibly Puritan America. It's not terribly clear and doesn't matter. There's a plague on the land that puts a headstrong, forward-thinking teenage girl and her lovable but pain-in-the-ass younger brother on a forest path for better lives maybe, when they happen upon a cottage inhabited by a suspiciously generous old woman who always has plenty of delicious food and is more than happy to let them stick around and share it in exchange for minor chores, despite Gretel's initial misgivings that somehow this is very familiar to things she remembers from an old fairy tale about a cursed child with unholy powers who was banished to the woods and lured people to their dooms. Okay, so yes, a lot of this is boilerplate. In fact, the biggest knock against Gretel and Hansel is that it's so well directed and acted as a pure mood piece, pretty much only getting dragged down when it has to slow and do the actual story plot exposition business, that the suspense and mystery stuff almost grabs you until you remember that they are clearly pretty much committing to following the beats of the Hansel and Gretel story through to the expected conclusion, and thus you can always kind of know what's coming, save for the nominal new gimmick this time of being an origin story for the witch that takes enough turns to keep you off guard, and a B story about Gretel having prospective witch-like abilities of her own that creates a rationale for their captor to treat the two children differently and extend the plot to feature length while she tries to maybe nurture the girl into being her successor or whatnot. But what makes this really work is that they've committed to a specific waking nightmare vibe, and once the rocky first act's worth of setup is out of the way, they generally don't break it. Given that there's really only 3 characters for the most part, there's a lot more, unsettling, is this really happening or not, drawn out moments, and did I see that or didn't I business than jump scares, but it all looks great, and there's a much different look and feel to anything that I've seen in theaters in a while. The kids are both doing solid turns, particularly Sophia Lillis, who you'll remember from It as Gretel, but for long stretches it's almost a one-woman show for Alice Kirge, who kind of always gets cast in this role, but is also always kind of great at it, as the witch. When was the last time a witch was scary? Like a classical pointy hat, big stick, bony fingers, I'll get you, my pretty witch, legitimately scary in a movie, because this one makes it work. And this was directed by Oz Perkins, who put out a couple decent indie horror movies that went right to Netflix, and the producer-writer team behind The Autopsy of Jane Doe, so this has some real pedigree here, and now having seen it, for the life of me, I can't figure out why the studio didn't bother at least trying to tell people this was real deal horror, but yeah, it is. Scary, great looking, not too gory, leaves you unsettled, killer imagery. Giving this one an 8 out of 10, take a look.